Welcome to Terminal Infiltration, a game where you play as a virus infiltrating a computer system, changing properties of the environment as you progress. This game utilizes what I like to call the terminal system, where the player inputs a keyword and action to affect actors or objects in the environment. For example, player equals large increases the player's size. To explain how the terminal system works, I'll first start in the actual widget blueprint for the terminal UI. So when the player presses tab, it opens up this interface, which has an enable text box for the keyword and the action, as well as lists of possible keywords and actions, so that's easier for the player to figure out what they can actually affect in the environment. From here, the player is just able to type. Once they commit text to either of the text boxes, which is done by clicking off of them, or by pressing a key like tab or enter, then it will set a variable called text keyword or text action, storing the text that they've inputted. I also have a nice quality of life thing in so that if the player presses enter, instead of clicking outside the text box, it automatically moves them to the next text box so that they can just continue typing in whatever code they want to input. Closing the terminal widget is a bit trickier. Because opening it pauses the game, I cannot get actual input from the player, so I can't check if the player presses the tab button and then call an event. What I have to do is something a bit tricky here, where I have to cast to the player controller and check every 0.1 seconds if the player has pressed the tab key down. If they have, then it unpauses the game, and it also sends the saved keyword and action text to an event on the side scroller character, which is the player character. Now we get to where that text went to. The side scroller character VP. What it checks first is if the keyword is player. If the keyword was player, then the game checks, alright, what was the action? And if the action text was any of these strings, be it invincible, flying, small, large, slow, fast, light, heavy, bouncy, rigid, then it will call the correct function. However, if the action was not any of those, then it will just play an error sound effect to show the player that that doesn't exist. Now, what if the keyword wasn't player? From here, the game then checks what the keyword was. If it's enemy, then it sends the action to an input on a nearby enemy in order to continue running the function. If it was turret, it sends the action to the nearest turret, etc., etc. When organizing the level, I did so in a way that would require the player to get past certain challenges, such as patrolling enemies, turrets, moving platforms, spikes, and swinging orbs. However, not all of these have to be affected using the terminal to actually get past them. The start of the level is done in such a way so that the player has to utilize the terminal to get past the first enemy. Otherwise, they just die and respawn back at the beginning. How they do this is left up to the player. My favorite method is stopping the enemy, making the enemy smaller, and making the player also small. This allows you to just walk right underneath them and continue with the level. However, from here and for most of the game, how you progress is completely up to the player. With all of these commands at your disposal, the player can choose many different ways to progress through the level. The majority of my sounds were gathered from freesound.org, as well as Mixkit in order to make sure that they are royalty-free. However, for the background music that you've been hearing this entire video, I actually arranged myself using a program called Music Maker. I also recorded a good amount of voice lines for when the player activates different terminal commands in order to give them greater feedback. I did not make any of the art assets myself. I bought them from the Unreal Marketplace, as shown here and within the credits menu within the game itself. I utilized a Trello to help keep track of what I was doing, be it bug fixing, what I'm currently working on, what I've completed, as well as separating my milestones to help keep things organized. The end result is a fully playable platformer where the player has to traverse the environment, affecting objects within it, including themselves, in order to reach the end where they can transport themselves deeper into the computer interface